the question, am I a racist? Why is that a bad question? I mean, you gave a little bit of like, I'm either a Klan or not, it's the spectrum, but why is that a bad question?
Right. I think it's not a productive question is what I would say. It's not productive because it sort of leads to a dead end. And what if I go before God and I ask God to examine my heart, am I a racist? And God says no. Okay, that's great. Like God and I are fine. That doesn't necessarily help me with anybody else.
Right.
And what if like if I have a black friend, if I go to Dr. Saundra and say, do you think I'm a racist? And she says, no, I don't think you are. Does she issue me a card that I can then show to everybody else of color and say, look, I'm not a racist? It's just not a helpful, it's not a helpful question. It's not productive. So like, even though I don't believe I'm a racist, I don't work to harbor hate in my heart. I don't, I was raised in the 60s and the 70s. I thought we'd be done with this by now. I thought we'd be so much further along. But I certainly have cultural insensitivities. There are certainly ways that I can learn to love everybody better. And there are times when I don't listen so there are better questions that come from Scripture that can move us into a more productive place.
Yeah, some of the better questions were, how can I show love to someone else? How can I be a better listener? What are ways that I can engage in conversations with people who don't look like me? How can I learn about other cultures and be open to cultural diversity? So there's so many other, that question, am I a racist? It gives most of us an easy out, as if the chapter's closed and there's no further conversations needed. And we wanted people to get to know each other. It's so much further beyond black and white. Within the book, we have people of multiple different cultural and ethnicities that are represented, men and women, because we wanted it to be more about the conversations than it was about specific races, so to speak.
So it's really starting from a different place. Like that is a question way down the line. And how do we start, which isn't even a good question or a productive question. But the first question is who needs to be loved? How do we understand people? Is that more the question? Is that what you said?
Sure. So tell me your story. Both of us start out with, why don't you Saundra starts, tell us what it's like to be a black female Christian in these times. And then I talk about, what is it like to be a white female Christian in these times? I live in Rhode Island. She lives in Alabama. I'm a little older than Saundra, and my kids are older. So we both are raising families. What is it like? And can I just listen to you and then respond in love without defensiveness? Can I, respond as if I'm not representing all white people on earth, and I can just receive your perspective on what it's like to be you
from your perspective, from where you sit, and then she can see that. So what were differences that you saw, or what were surprises that each of you saw in each other, even on those first initial conversations?
I think for myself, because of where Lori lives, she lives in Rhode Island, where the percentage of people that are non-white is extremely small. I assume she had very little experiences with people of other ethnicities. Yeah. And so as she's telling her story and she's talking about when she dated people of different ethnicities, it's like, whoa, I didn't anticipate that because of really just kind of putting her in a box where this is where she lives, this must be her experience. And I think we have to be able to allow ourselves to see people in their story without applying our own biases and prejudices upon it. I think that's one of the things that we talk about is just that, none of us enter into the conversation free from internal biases and prejudices. Right. We live, we grow up, we experience certain things that influence us. We just need to be aware of that, not ignorant to the fact that they exist.
Yeah. And I really learned from listening to how she processed experiences that I sometimes saw from different perspectives. She talks about in the book about meeting a patient who was very much like my dad. Her first patient was a white male and older, and he said something like, "Oh, you're my first, black doctor." My dad never had an unexpressed thought, it just whatever came to his mind.
Said it, yeah.
Right. And so listening to Saundra's, how she processed that and then how she responded to him so gracefully and so, so graciously was really wonderful for me, but also to hear the pain that she experienced, like how many times a day that happened. Because in my life, that would happen. My dad might say something like that, and then he and I would talk afterwards, like, okay, so what's a better way to say that, Dad? But like it happened to her all the time. So that was, for me, it was just really informative and helped me to understand better.